Thanks very much for coming. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waterways in which we're visiting today. And today we are passing through Camaragal country. I'd like to pay respect to elders past, present and future. So welcome to today's double header. So first of all, off the ranks today is Ying with her presentation on imposter phenomenon. So before I hand it over to Ying, just like to introduce the CoC panel. So it's Professor Teresa Dickey as the expert, Dr. Emma Bradshaw as the other expert, all led by by the ACU McKillop Distinguished Professor Herb Marsh. I'll get it right one day. And on Ying's PhD panel, we have Professor John Marshall Reeve, Dr. Haran Jiang, all led by her principal, Professor Jessie Gao. So without any further ado, Ying, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hello, everyone. The central topic of my PhD research is impulse phenomenon, and I would like to explore that from four perspectives: the meta-analytic, the longitudinal, the family, and cross-cultural perspectives. And
Right. Got it. Yeah.
And first of all, I'd like to introduce the impulse phenomenon. I'm not sure if you heard about that or not. The impulse phenomenon can also be called the impulse syndrome. But in recent years, the researchers have increasingly preferred the impulse phenomenon to recognize that it cannot just confine to the medical or clinical settings, but it can also be observed across a wide range of domain and population, such as work and education. So through my presentation, I would like to use IP, the impulse phenomenon. And IP was first pointed out by Clance and Imis in 1978. They defined it as a sense of being flawed, even if there are many evidence of achievement. And we provide some example items so you can simply check if you have the impulse phenomenon. And people experience IP always find it too difficult to internalize their success. They will like to attribute their success to the external factors such as the luck, the chance, or the mistake of others. And they would like to downplay the positive feedback and pay more attention to the negative feedbacks and errors, and they always interpret that in a negative way. So well, you can find that they always need to spend a lot of time to struggle to develop the stable confidence, and they are highly sensitive to the evaluation, which over time lead to the persistent self-monitoring. And after introducing impulse phenomenon, let's go move on to the background and theoretical framework of my PhD research. In recent years, the IP has increasingly observed in the educational context. And I would like to see if we look closely at the characteristic of the education settings, it can help us to understand why this is the case. And firstly, I would like to see that the students in school are always at the developmental stage. So their self-judgment, their self-understanding are mainly based on the evaluation and comparison. And as we all know that there are multiple evaluation sources and forms, or you can see such as the tests, grades, the rankings, the daily feedback, and from teacher, peers, and the family member. So under this situation, the students' self-judgment are consistently reinforced. And the outcome of evaluation are always related to the high-stake decisions, such as the university admission or the future job opportunities. So it can help us to understand why we would like to focus on the students. But another question is that why IP is important. Based on the conceptual distinction, we categorize the psychological outcome into a psychological health and functioning. In the context of students, the psychological health mainly considers students' emotional experience and their self-concept. And psychological functioning refers to students' capacity to operate among the motivational, emotional, and social domains. And both from the positive and negative aspects, the psychological health and functioning can be divided into the well-being and ill-being, the adaptive functioning, and more adaptive functioning. And the empirical study has shown that IP is associated with many factors of the psychological health and functioning, what you can see such as the happiness, anxiety, depression, motivation, perfectionism, and so on. So many factors. But although more and more studies have focused on the association between IP and the student's psychological outcome, the evidence are fragmented, And most of the studies are cross-sectional rather than longitudinal studies. So we don't know the directionality of this association, and we need to place IP in the developmental process. So we would like to explore IP from a family perspective. And as we all know, that family are the earliest and the most enduring source of the evaluative meaning that can shape how students interpret their success and failure. And that idea is not new, where you can see that Clance and Amis in 1978 have emphasized the importance of family in the development of IP. And this suggests that IP can always emerge in the family where there are the strong achievement expectations and the frequent within family comparisons. So because we need to talk about parenting, we draw the identity parenting framework. And within that framework, the parenting can be divided into the autonomous supportive parenting and controlling, psychologically controlling parenting. And let's talk about the first one. In the autonomous supportive parenting, parents always respect their children's internal experience and their perspectives. So, the parents always provide the guidance, the structure, and the support. So where you can say it emphasizes the acceptance that's not a conditional, the informational and rather than judgmental evaluation and the perspective speaking. But in contrast, in the psychologically controlling parenting, the parents always control their children's behavior by putting the psychological pressure on them. They would like to use the relational or emotional pressures such as the guilt or shame or the conditional approval. So well, you can see that it emphasizes the conditional acceptance, the threat-oriented evaluation, and the dismissed communication. And based on the identity parenting framework, we argue that the autonomous supportive parenting can lead to the lower level children's IP because children can learn that their value doesn't come from their performance or the achievements. But in contrast, the psychologically controlling parenting will increase the children's IP. Children always need to have the better performance. But we also would like to argue that the parenting influence doesn't operate in the same way for all children. And the important individual difference is emotion regulation. The emotion regulation is a capacity to manage and adjust the student's emotions. So we argue that if the children have the stronger emotion evaluation, they may be more resilient to the controlling parenting and less likely to turn to IPE. But if the children have the weaker emotion regulation capacity, they may be more vulnerable and to maintain or to develop the IP. So other that the emotion regulation can moderate the association between parenting and the children's IP, but there is just a theoretical assumption. And actually, the evidence linking parenting and the children's IP are limited, especially from the longitudinal studies. And the individual differences are underexplored, such as the emotion regulation as a moderator. Besides the children's IP, we also pay attention to the parents' IP, especially in parenting. I know some parents always think that they are the inadequate parents, even if their parenting are highly approved by others. So we argue that the parents' IP in parenting can be related to their actual parenting practice. And if the children have the lower level of IP in parenting, they may be more likely to use the autonomous supportive parenting. But if they have the higher level of IP, they may accept it to use psychologically controlling parenting. And we also would like to argue that the parenting doesn't happen in isolation, and it always shaped by the culture and the cultural perspective. The cultural context influence how people or how parents understand the good parenting and how the supportive and the controlling parenting can be interpreted. The same parenting practice can look different in different cultures, and maybe some parenting practice looks controlling in some contexts, but maybe responsible in another. So argue that the cultural context can also moderate the association between parents' IP in parenting and the parenting. Yeah. So we would like to focus on my PhD research would like to fill these gaps, and let's move on to my studies. Based on everything I've talked about, the overall aim of my PhD research would like to examine the association between students' IP and the psychological outcome, and we would like to place that association in the developmental process. And we also like to see to that progression of IP with their family and cultural context. So, well, you can see, as I mentioned, that I would like to research, I would like to explore IP from the full connected perspectives. And the study 1 and 2 would like to focus on the association between IP and psychological outcome. And the study 1 would like to examine association between IP and both psychological health and functioning using meta-analysis. And the study 2 would like to focus on the directionality of the IP and psychological health. Yeah, we pay more attention to psychological health. And the reason I would like to explore that later. It will take the longitudinal perspective to examine how IP and the psychological health can influence each other over time. And the study 3 moved further upstream to focus on the role of parenting. It's like to examine association between parenting and children's IP, and it's also longitudinal studies. And the study 4 looked earlier in this process, where you can see we would like to focus on the association between parents of IP in parenting and their actual parenting practice. And it's a cross-cultural study. So, well, you can see that the 4 studies formed an integrated framework, moving from the parent IP in parenting to children's IP, and finally to the children or the students' psychological outcome. So let's move on to study 1. The aim of study 1 is to synthesize and compare the association between IP and students' psychological health and functioning. And based on the aim, so we point out 4 research questions. Well, you can see that in research question 1, we would like to examine whether association between IP and psychological health can differ in magnitude from the association between IP and psychological functioning. And in research question 2 and 3, we would like to separately and specifically examine association between IP and subdomain of the both psychological health and functioning. Or you can see that in research question 2, we would like to examine association between IP and both the well-being and ill-being. And in research question 3, we would like to examine association between IP and the adaptive and more adaptive functioning. And in research question 4, we would like to examine a range of moderator where you can see the outcome contrasts, the educational stage, gender, racial, IP measurement, subject area, and region. And actually, this meta-analysis has almost done, but still need some reviews. And we've identified 154 studies with 505 effect sites, and all the effect sites were expressed as a correlation. And sorry. Yeah, and I would like to say that both psychological health and functioning has a positive and negative aspect. So we need to harmonize all the effect sites to the common direction. For analysis. But we keep the original slide when reporting a result. So the finding can reflect the original meaning. So don't worry about that. And well, you can see the result. The IP showed a stronger association with psychological health and functioning. And within psychological health, it also has a stronger association with ill-being than well-being, and also more related to the more adaptive functioning than adaptive functioning. And we also find that a gender composition can moderate the association between IP and ill-being. That means that the association can become stronger as the female proportion increases. And now let's move on to study 2. Based on the results of study 1, we can find that IP is more associated with psychological health and functioning. So we pay more attention to psychological health. And the aim of study 2 would like to examine association, directionality between IP and psychological health. So based on the aim, so we point out 2 research questions, and we would like to examine whether the decrease and increase of IP can predict a relative change of children's well-being and ill-being, and vice versa. And the study tool would like to use the data set from the Luxembourg. And the data set includes about 1,100 students in grade 5 and grade 7. And because it's a longitudinal study, it will conducted 3 measurement waves across 1 year. And the student need to report their IP, their well-being, and their ill-being. And we would like to use the ISMPM to explore the directionality. And the study 3 focuses on the role of parenting. We would like to examine association, the directional association between children's perceived parenting and their IP. And we also would like to introduce the emotion regulation as a moderator. So where you can see that based on aims, we point out 3 research questions. The research question 1 and 2, we would like to examine how different type of parenting can predict a later change of children's IP. And in research question 3, we would like to examine the moderating role of the emotion regulation in this longitudinal association. And the study 3 would like to use the same data set as study 2. But the students don't not only need to report their IP, but also need to report their perceived parenting and the emotion regulation. And we would like to use the longitudinal SAM. And the study 4 mainly focuses on the parents groups to examine how parents' IP in parenting can be translated to their actual parenting practice, and whether their translation can differ across a culture. So the 2 research questions are consistent with the research aims. And study 4 would like to use the parent survey data from 10 countries, but it's also collaborated with the Luxembourg. And the parents need to report their IP in parenting and their parenting practice. And we would like to use the SAM framework. And finally, I would like to summarize the contribution of my PhD research. Well, you can see that at the conceptual level, my PhD research can provide a clear way of thinking about the association between IP and psychological outcome. I mean, by distinguishing the psychological health and functioning, and we place IP in the developmental and conceptual model or level. So we acknowledge that IP can change over time and across a culture. And at the methodological level, as mentioned, that we would like to explore IP from the 4 connected perspectives. And because we use the ISLPM, so we can distinguish the stable trait and the contextual fluctuations. And at a practical level, my PhD research can provide some evidence to inform the parents level and cultural sensitive intervention for the IP prevention. And we can also provide some guidance and instructions to provide the students psychological health and functioning, even if they have the high level of IP. And this is my timeline. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Hold on, I'd like to hand over the chair, but floor is yours.
Great presentation.
Yeah.
Your proposal really strong. I enjoyed reading it. I find the topic fascinating, and I'm fascinated with what you're going to do there. I'm going to start off with 2 questions that my prerogative as the chair. One of them is, this is a messy construct. I mean, first of all, if I'm dumb, if I'm a low achieving student, then I can't have an imposter phenomenon. It's only, I have to be bright enough to be an imposter. And that's really tricky in terms of how that's operationalized within the study. Does that mean that you have to kick out kids that have low achievement? Leave that one. Then the construct, is it a trait? Is it a state? Is it a disposition? A reflective factor suggests that it would be unidimensional, but these are quite distinct components that are in it. So does that mean that it's an index or a formative factor? These are tricky sorts of things that you haven't fully dealt with, but probably you need to deal with it. But I'm happy to hear your thoughts on it.
I like to say that, the stress is not means the grades or the test. And actually we can success at any settings or any times, not just the grades. I mean, maybe we can draw a picture and we think that's it's a good achievement. So I don't think that's not just the grades, but it's a priority to measure the students if they have the imposter. But
Well, can you have an imposter syndrome or phenomenon?
Yeah.
If you're a low achievement student?
Actually, the question is how to define the lower achievement students.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Even conceptually.
Yeah, so we argue that the students can succeed for maybe in their areas or in their settings. It's not just the one. How can I say? For example, the students can achieve in the drawing competition, yeah, but not in the grade in the school or in the test. So maybe at that moment or at that situation, they can think that they can think that they have the achievement, but maybe they don't internalize this achievement. So at that time, they can have the impulse phenomenon.
Well, that's going to be an interesting one that you're going to have to deal with more in terms of the actual thesis, but and it's not you, I mean, it's the whole area. These are tricky questions in the whole area. The second one that I got is, I was surprised that you didn't to put more focus on the school context.
Yeah.
I'm sure that parents are important, but if I look at my big fish with a pond effect, I would imagine that if I'm a really bright student and I get into a selective school, and all of a sudden I realize that I'm not as bright as I thought I would be, I would think that that would be a recipe for an imposter phenomenon. And so I was surprised that you didn't look at the school context. I mean, studies 2 and studies 3 will be multi-level. So there will be students nested within a school or class. So you'll have to look at the school level.
Yeah.
But I would think that it'd be interesting to look at school average achievement as one of the predictors of the phenomenon. That's just a suggestion, but on the other hand, your thesis is already highly ambitious. And I suspect that there might be an issue where you have to drop one of the studies in order to finish in time. So I don't really want to add more things, but I couldn't resist because it just seems so closely related to the big vision. But I'll close with that and open it up to other experts.
I'll get Teresa and then you come.
Yeah, so firstly, I agree with a lot of what Herb said. Great document, great studies, well structured, well written in all of it, and also very ambitious.
Yeah.
And multi-layered. But my first question, because Herb already entered into that area from my perspective, also working in the school context, is while you focus a lot on the influence of parents, and you're viewing schools as this environment that creates the pressure. But what do you think? And I know this is not a focus of your research, but I still want to ask your thoughts. What do you think the role of school climate and teacher relationships is? So you focus a lot on the parent relationship, but what about the teachers? Because they, I would think, also have, especially in your population, student age children in that transition phase, there would be a major influence of teachers and the school climate type things on me experiencing imposter syndrome. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we also argue that the parents' behavior can be similar to the parenting. The teacher's behavior can be similar about parenting, and we also think that the teacher can be divided into the autonomy or control. So we also think that the different type of teaching can reflect the can influence the different type of IP, the student's IP.
And do you think the parents' influence is stronger than the teachers, or this is just your focus?
This is just my focus because it's just my experience, but I would like to focus it on the parenting if I have the time.
And the teacher?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And another question is, in your meta-analyses, I saw that you already started
Yeah.
it. Do you, or what do you think, will there be differences in outcomes that are more like well-being like versus outcomes, so like belonging, etc.?
Yeah.
I know it's not well-being, but more in that area, or outcomes such like more academic outcomes.
Yeah.
What do you think? Where will there be stronger relationships with IP?
Oh, the result has shown that IP have the stronger associated with ill-being and more adaptive functioning.
More functioning than the other ones?
Yeah, more adaptive functioning.
And
But it's stronger than the stronger in with psychological health than functioning. Yeah, and within that functioning, it's more associated with more adaptive functioning.
okay.
Yeah, and in the health, it's more adapted in the well-being.
And was that what you expected?
It's consistent with my expectation. Yeah, because IP is actually an active, self-evaluative experience. An active, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'll hand over to Emma.
Thank you, Teresa, and congratulations, Ying. I echo what Herb and Teresa have both said. Congratulations on a great presentation and the written document. Like from the title, I was like, oh, this is such a cool topic. And then as I read through, I was constantly thinking like, this is how you do a CoC. So well done. I had a couple of questions for you. One relates to what Teresa was just talking about. So I might start there. You say that the associations are stronger for ill-being than for well-being. And I'm wondering, you say that's consistent with your expectations. What's your interpretation of that? Is there a theoretical explanation for that? Is it a genuine asymmetry? Is it a measurement factor? Why do you think ill-being is the stronger correlate?
Because as I mentioned, that IP actually is a negative experience. The negative self is negative self expected experience. So the characteristic of IP is too difficult to internalize their success and their self-doubt. So I think in the theoretical level, it's of course more related to the ill-being than well-being.
Yes, I think theoretically, you could, and I'm sure that your supervisors will talk to you about this. It strikes me as something consistent with the dual process model, that you've got a lot of SDT in your thesis, that kind of bad stuff correlates more strongly with bad stuff than it does with good stuff. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about was your differentiating between psychological health and psychological functioning or adaptive functioning. Where do you see that, paying off theoretically? Like, what is that distinction clarifying that the field currently muddles up?
We think that we categorize the psychological health it's more about the emotions and their self-concepts, but the psychological functioning more related to the motivation, the social relationship, like the belongingness or the that's just the motivation, such as attributions, goals, or the mastering goals, the mastering oriented goals, or the avoidance oriented goals, or the motivation and about the social domain.
Got you. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks. I'll hand it over. Thanks, and congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Emma. All right, just got a couple of minutes. Anybody open to the floor? Questions online? Oh, one question. It's just back to
Okay.
your slide 5.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back here. That's all right. It's fine. Who's getting whipped there? Is that a student or a teacher? I don't know, it could be both.
I think it's the students.
It's a student. It's been a while since students have been whipped at school.
But teacher may have the feeling, may have the same feeling.
Could be. That's what I was thinking. Well, it could be. My wife's like that some afternoons after actually get to school. Yeah. Any other questions before we finish this up? All right, so before we just thanks Ying, I'd just like to know we'll be back in an hour for the second half of Doubleheader with Emma Stentz. So thank you, everybody. Emma, if you can stay on the line, I'll move the panel on to conferral. But another round of applause for Ying. Thank you. Well done.